Quick thank you to all of you for being here. It's a nice night out. I appreciate this big crowd. I'm going to start with a short video that I made last week that sort of sets the stage for the night. It's only about 25 seconds, but I think it'll be a good way to start the evening. So let's.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. I appreciate your taking the time to spend an evening together. A big thank you to Loudoun Public Library System, Lorraine Maffa and her team, and to Old Ox for hosting us this evening. Tonight, we are going to talk about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence, what the heck is that anyway? But before we get to that, I want you all to do a bit of a thought experiment with me.
All right, so right about now, I'm hoping that everyone recognizes that that wasn't me. And if you did recognize that, some of you are maybe impressed, some of you are creeped out, some of you are wondering what the heck was that. And I just want you to know that all of those emotions are perfectly reasonable. I have them in my head at all times about this stuff because it's still in a very unknown phase right now. So just keep that in mind as we're going through things tonight. But I do want to say from me, not from fake me, a big thank you to the library system for sponsoring this tonight, Lorraine and her team, as well as Old Ox. It's a great venue. I'm really glad that you all came out. So a big thank you to everyone for doing that. And I do want to do a bit of a thought experiment with you all this evening. I want you to imagine that the year is 1830. And I want you to imagine that you are a farm girl or a farm boy back in the year 1800. Cameras don't exist yet. Now, before I get to that part, I do want to ask one other quick question to the audience. By a show of hands, how many people in the room do not have a cell phone? So I think pretty much everyone in the room. Show of hands again. How many people in the room have not taken at least one picture in the last week? All right, so a couple people, but for the most part, everybody's taking a picture. Now, let's go back to our thought experiment. Here's 1830. You're a farm girl, a farm boy. Cameras don't exist. Some random person shows up and tells you that they have a box about the size of a deck of playing cards. And with this box, you can capture an image of anything, anywhere, anytime, and take it home with you. And you can take as many of these things as you want. Now, as an 1800 farm girl, the only images you're familiar with are paintings and drawings. And those are primarily for the elite, wealthy people in your society. So you don't really have any concept of owning images. So this person comes up to you and says, you can have a box. And that does all this. And what's amazing about this box is that in a couple of years, all of your friends, your family, everyone is going to have the same box. So depending on who heard you talking about this, you would probably run out of town as either a heretic or a witch. Because you just don't have the vocabulary at that point to even talk about what a cell phone or photography really is. That's where we are with AI right now. We don't know what's going to happen. Everyone who's talking about it, myself included, are speculating. Because we just don't have the vocabulary yet to talk about what it's going to mean for our society and where it's going to go. So, with that uncertainty, what should we do? The first thing I want you to do is to be curious. Be curious about it. Don't ignore it. Don't deify it either. It is not the be-all and end-all of everything that some people will tell you that it is. But just be curious about it and approach it from a sense of wonder and interest in what it is. What's really interesting to me is that from an AI perspective, AI, in a literal sense, has been around for about 80 years. From the very first line of computer code that was written, machines have been doing some of that decision-making for us. There's this concept in programming called an if-then statement. And the if-then statement is sort of the core of all or most programming. And the concept of an if-then is that if this condition exists, then I want you to do this thing. And that's generally how computers work, or have worked. Those rules, those if-then rules, they were written by a person. And the computer would take that, with some input and data and whatever you put into the computer, and it would execute that line of code or that if-then statement, and it would give you a mostly predictable output. Anyone who's ever used a computer knows it doesn't always do what it's supposed to do, but a mostly predictable output. But what's happened in the last few years is we've come up with something called generative AI. And generative AI is different. Generative AI doesn't just execute a set of rules, it learns based on a set of rules. So a programmer has written a set of rules that describes how these platforms should learn. They're fed a lot of data that it then quote unquote learns using those rules. And it puts all that information into a database and a statistical model of what that information looks like. And then whenever you ask it a question, whenever you prompt it for something, it goes through its database and it creates a statistical model that says, I think, statistically speaking, this chunk of stuff is the answer to what I was just asked about. So a good example of this is teaching AI how to generate a picture of an apple. So you feed in a whole bunch of pictures of apples into the machine. Red apples, yellow apples, green apples, big apples, little apples, apples with different backgrounds. And the machine takes those things and it creates it into a representation that it understands, feeds it into a statistical model, and then it stores it. So then when you go say, generate an image of me of an apple, it calculates what it thinks an apple should look like, and it shows you that image on the right. Unless it gives you a basketball instead. Now, to be fair, the image on the right originally had an apple in his hand. But to illustrate my point, I asked him to change it to a basketball. And the reason I did that is that the algorithm actually has no real idea whether what it produced and what it told you is correct or accurate or not. It just knows that there's a statistical likelihood that what it gave to you is an apple, or the answer to whatever question you happen to have. So what do we do with that? What do we do with that information? So there's three things I want you to keep in mind as we talk. One is that AI is a computer system, generative AI in particular, is a computer system that creates a statistical model of the data that's been given. It's not magic. It's a computer system that follows a set of rules, at least in terms of how it learns. When you ask it for something, it doesn't actually know the answer. It pieces together what it thinks is the answer based on the statistical model that it has created with the input that it was trained on. And then lastly, and this is maybe the most important thing to keep in mind, it has no idea whether what it gave you is correct or not. At least not yet. It calculates a probability, and based on that probability, it will give you what it thinks you are looking for. There's also been some evidence recently that some of these platforms will learn your biases, meaning that, well, they're generally programmed and intended to give you what you were asking for. And it will unintentionally learn your biases, and it will actually give you data that reinforces your biases in some cases. So not only is the data that it's giving you potentially incorrect, but it's also potentially biased information based on what it has learned is your own biases. So you have to be very aware of what it's giving you and what it's producing for you. One other thing I want to mention before we go on is privacy. So we all, every person in this room, give companies and corporations and systems a lot of our data. A lot of our data. We generally do it willingly. We grumble about it, but we do it anyway because we like the convenience of whatever they're offering. AI is a little bit different. These platforms right now are not regulated. They don't necessarily have very clear privacy policies, and those privacy policies are evolving. So when you're using these tools, keep that in mind. Don't put anything in there that you would be embarrassed if your neighbor saw. Especially personally identifiable information or information about your organization or your company. It's entirely possible that information could show up in someone's results at some point if that particular platform is training itself on the input from its users as well. So whenever you're using them, keep this privacy concept in mind. So I could talk about this stuff all night. But I thought it'd be interesting to bring another point of view into this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to interview ChatGPT for you. Now, because I didn't want you to watch me typing up here, I've done this in advance. I have a chat with ChatGPT where I ask him questions, he gave me responses. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the question to you as if I was asking it to ChatGPT, and then I'm going to have ChatGPT actually talk to you. I haven't doctored any of this, I haven't changed any of it, I didn't prompt or prep it in any way. This is purely a real-time dialogue that I had with the platform, and that I'm just going to play back for you at this point. And then after that, we're going to do some more real-time stuff that's not sort of canned. But let's switch over here. All right. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to read the prompt that I gave to ChatGPT, and then it's going to read its response back to me. So I said, I'm currently standing in front of an audience of about 100 people. I would like to interview you and ask you to do a few things that will demonstrate your capabilities for these fine folks. To do that, I would like you to keep your answers short and concise. We don't want to bore them. Do you think you can do that for me? ChatGPT says,
absolutely, Jason. I'm ready to impress. Fire away with those questions.
I said, you got to know me over the past few months. In 150 words or so, tell these folks a little bit more about me.
Sure thing. Meet Jason Balser, a problem solver at the intersection of business and technology. He's a cool-headed leader who thrives in chaos, bringing clarity and direction where it's needed most. As a departmental CIO, he's spearheaded strategic programs like implementing Microsoft Dynamics CRM and designing global BI platforms. Jason's passion lies in aligning stakeholders and driving forward pragmatic solutions. Outside of work, he's all about continuous learning and community engagement. Whether he's helping a nonprofit streamline their digital operations or guiding people on personal cybersecurity, Jason's focus is always on delivering impactful results. Oh, and he's got a knack for making complex ideas accessible, and a bit of humor never hurts. How'd I do?
Well, I'm trying to stay humble, but that was pretty good. So please tell me about yourself. Remember to keep it short and sweet.
Thanks, Jason. I'm ChatGPT, your AI-powered assistant, here to make life a bit easier. I'm a jack of all trades when it comes to answering questions, solving problems, and even helping you brainstorm ideas or write content. Think of me as that super smart friend who's always ready to lend a hand. Whether you're looking for quick advice, creative inspiration, or just a good laugh, I'm here to keep things interesting and make sure you've got the information you need, fast and fuss-free. How's that for short and sweet?
Great. Let's start with something silly. Tell me a nursery rhyme about a porcupine and a balloon in style of Humpty Dumpty.
Porcupine sat on a hill, eyeing a balloon, all still and chill. The balloon floated close, all shiny and round, but Porcupine popped it with a prickly sound. The balloon went bang and flew away. And Porcupine sighed, well, that's my day. No more balloons for him to see, just a spiky pal, wild and free. How's that for a prickly twist on a classic?
That was nice, thank you. A bit more of a serious topic now. Tell me what makes you optimistic about the future of AI.
What makes me optimistic about the future of AI is its potential to solve some of the world's biggest challenges. From advancing healthcare with early diagnostics to optimizing energy use and tackling climate change, AI offers tools that can make a real difference. It's also empowering people, streamlining mundane tasks, and opening up creative possibilities we've never had before. When used responsibly, AI has the power to enhance human capabilities and create a more efficient, innovative, and connected world. The key is to balance innovation with ethics, and I see that happening more and more. Pretty uplifting, right?
You don't have to end every response with a question.
Got it. Thanks for the heads up.
Can you give me one specific practical example of how people in the audience can leverage AI today?
Absolutely. One practical way you can leverage AI today is by using tools like ChatGPT or other AI writing assistants to draft emails, reports, or even brainstorming ideas. It can save you time on repetitive tasks, help you get past writer's block, and improve the quality of your communication by suggesting clear and concise language. Whether you're in marketing, sales, or any field that involves a lot of writing, AI can be a powerful productivity booster.
Now, on the flip side, what concerns you about the future of AI?
What concerns me about the future of AI is the potential for misuse, especially when it comes to privacy, security, and bias. AI systems can be used to manipulate information, invade personal privacy, or reinforce harmful biases if not properly managed. There's also the risk of over-reliance on AI, where human judgment might take a backseat. The challenge lies in ensuring robust ethical guidelines and transparency in how AI is developed and deployed so it enhances our lives without compromising our values or safety.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. I want to demonstrate creating a plan for a birthday party. A birthday party is for a kid about 8 years old who loves Batman. There will be about 12 kids at the party. It will last about 2 hours and will be in my backyard. Please create a clear and concise plan for the party. Now, I'm not going to have them read this plan to you because that would just be cruel. But if you look through this, it went through and created a plan for invitations, a plan for decorations, activities that can be done. One of the things you could also do at this point is for each of these games, you could say, please give me the rules for the game. Create some rules for the follow-up question. And it goes through and gives you, your snack break, your games, a backup plan just in case it rains, and then kind of what happens at the end. So that's the end of the interview. But I have a couple of other use cases that I wanted to share with you all tonight. One of them that I like a lot is creation of something called alt text. So on the web, every image that you see, if that website is accessible, should have alternate text that sits behind that image that can be read by a screen reader if someone who's visually impaired is on that website. So a lot of sites don't have it because it's a laborious process to go through and create this alternate text for every single image on the screen, but it can have a real impact on people who need that accessibility. So one of the things that I've done is I didn't create this. There's a website, it's a random image generator. I had to turn safe mode on because earlier there were some images that were not exactly safe. So you come here and you generate a random image. So let's just go ahead and generate something. Oh, that looks interesting. Okay, so let's go with this. So we're going to copy this image. So I'm going to say create alt text for this image. And this will take a minute. This is sort of an advanced box. It has to actually look at that image, decipher it, decode it, do all kinds of stuff. So it comes back pretty quickly, and let's see what it says.
The image depicts a humanoid robot with a sleek metallic design. The robot has a bird-like head with a beak-shaped faceplate, glowing red eyes, and various exposed mechanical components, including wires and joints. It is standing in what appears to be a high-tech laboratory or workshop, with various screens, tools, and equipment visible in the background. The robot's design is futuristic and advanced, with a strong armored build and intricate detailing, suggesting it may be used for complex tasks or as a combat unit.
It's pretty good, right? So let's do one more of those, just because. So let's generate another image. All right, this one. I like doing the abstract ones because the abstract ones to me are more challenging, right? There's not well-defined lines and that sort of thing. So let's do this one and see what it says.
The image portrays a surreal scene inside a large, elegant library filled with bookshelves. In the center, a young woman with long, dark hair wearing a blue dress stands with her head bowed and a book clutched to her chest. Surrounding her are fluffy white clouds, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. Books are floating in midair around her, as if being carried by the clouds. The overall mood of the image is whimsical and introspective, blending the elements of imagination and reality.
So what's interesting to me about these descriptions isn't just that it's described,
You didn't have to rephrase the question again. You just wrote, try this one.
Yes.
So ChatGPT already knows what your train of thought is?
on a limited basis. So if you're in here and you're sort of in the vein of doing something, it does have some temporary memory. So yes, it's a great observation and a good point. But what's interesting to me about this alternate text is it doesn't just describe the image, it actually talks about the mood of the image. And so if you're trying to give this to someone who's looking at the web and they can't see the picture, it takes it that one step further so that they can truly understand what's going on there. So let's shift away from images for a second and do some summarization. So there's an article on the Smithsonian website that I found. It's about this photographer, Vivian Maier. She was a photographer in the early 20th century and apparently was essentially unknown until after she passed away. And her family found all these undeveloped rolls of film. She apparently took like 150,000 street scenes in her life. It's a rather long article, and so I thought I would have ChatGPT, and I did this just so I wouldn't have to copy and paste. But all I did was type the prompt in. I said, summarize the following article in 150 words. One thing about these platforms, they get kind of wordy and verbose. They like to show off about how much they know. So what I found is that you want to give it a limit a lot of times on how long you want something, so you get something that's a little more concise.
Vivian Maier, a reclusive nanny, secretly became one of the 20th century's most celebrated street photographers. Despite taking over 150,000 photos, she rarely developed or shared them. Her work was discovered in 2007 when storage lockers containing her negatives were auctioned off. John Maloof, who bought some of her work, later revealed her remarkable talent, leading to widespread acclaim. Maier's photography is now featured in her first major American retrospective in New York, showcasing her unique, self-taught perspective on everyday life.
Let's go back to PowerPoint. All right, so that was interesting, right? So all those use cases, and believe it or not, those are pretty basic elementary use cases, right? We're not even getting into things that are using the APIs behind the scenes to inject data into these models and to get things out in a more automated fashion. These are things that you can do pretty easily. So where do we go from here? First of all, well, I have some homework for you all. It's not going to be graded, so don't worry. But I do have some homework for you all. But before that, I want to put my fortune teller hat on. Now, keep in mind that I told you at the beginning of this that we don't really know where this stuff's going, right? And it's all speculation. But there's some people making some pretty educated guesses. So I want to give you one of my guesses for where I think this is headed. For about 80% of us, in a few months, years, on the timeline, we're not going to have to worry about what AI is or isn't. And the reason is, I think it's going to be embedded in everything we already do. In fact, it already is. I'm guessing a lot of you use Google Maps or Apple Maps to get here tonight. That is essentially a form of generative AI. Google and Apple do not have the route from your house to Old Ox stored in their database. So whenever you asked it to bring you here, it essentially created something like you just saw. Now that is actually a little bit easier than what we just saw because it knows the domain. It knows that it needs to route you from one point to the other. And so that's a closed domain. It's technically easier to program, but it's still very, very sophisticated. But you're already using it. You have a Nest thermostat in your house. It's learning your patterns. It's updating based on what you're doing. No one programmed it at the factory to know that you like to sleep at 68 degrees at night. So these things are already in our environment. We're already using them. The generative stuff that we saw tonight, I think is going to become much more pervasive over the next 6, 12, 18 months. Microsoft already has a product called Copilot that does a lot of the stuff that we just talked about already within the Office ecosystem. The next version of Apple's iPhone is going to have ChatGPT built into Siri at some level. Google is doing this stuff on its platforms as well. So these things are coming, right? Some of them are already here, but they're coming. And for most of us, they're just going to be there. We won't know that we're using it. We just know that we're going to ask the phone or the computer to do something and it happens. The flip side, though, is that for the other 20%, for the 80% to a certain extent, I think we're going to see a division in our workforce. And it's going to be the people who understand how to use these platforms and those who don't. And if you think about the internet today and cell phones, if you don't know how to use a cell phone today, right, we already established everyone has one. If you don't know how to use a smartphone today, if you don't know how to use the internet today, it's very hard to get by in our society to do much of anything right now, right? And I think AI is going to start doing it. If you don't understand how to not be manipulated by AI, and if you don't understand how to maximize it, you're going to be at a very real disadvantage. There's a lot of programs that are happening in Loudoun County right now with some of the folks that are here in addition to this one. We're trying to educate younger people, students, as well as the general population. We're just not educating people enough about these capabilities and platforms yet. So I think those two things are going to happen. I think a lot of it's going to become ubiquitous. It's just going to bake itself into everything that we do every day. But I do think that the people who embrace it, understand it, and leverage it are going to have a very real and distinct advantage over those who don't over the next couple of years. So your homework, it's easy, I promise. So what I want you to do is pick a tool and play. Pick one, create an account, and play. Set aside time on Friday afternoon for an hour and play. Every afternoon, when you drink your afternoon coffee at 4:30, log on and play. And if you haven't picked up on the theme, I want you to go play. And the reason I want you to play is the best way to learn anything, but especially tools like these, are just play with it. You're not going to make a mistake. You're not going to mess something up. As long as you don't put your social security number. Don't put your social security number. But beyond that, you're not going to make a mistake. So just pick something to play. What I really like about this view is that it gives you tools in a bunch of different domains. So what I want you to do is to pick something that you do already, whether it's writing emails, whether it's reading articles on the internet, whether it's playing with photography, whether it's creating music, whether it's editing family photos, whatever it is you already do. I want you to find that thing and find a tool that will help you with that thing. Most of these have free versions. To get the really advanced stuff on some of them, you do need to have a paid version for some of them. There are a lot of free tools out there. One caveat about this slide, these things change, it feels like on a daily basis. There are new tools introduced all the time. Some of them go away, some of them merge, some of them change their business model. So this is sort of a point in time. I have personally played with or used to varying degrees the ones that are circled in orange. Just play. There is one other thing I wanted to touch on about this, and it's called prompt engineering. Some of you may have heard of this. Prompt engineering is a discipline that centers around optimizing how you ask AI to do things. So if you notice, we didn't really put a whole lot of structure to the questions that we were asking, but one of the things that is an example of prompt engineering is asking it to do something in 150 words, right? You want to be as specific as you can if you want a specific output. Now, if you just want brainstorming ideas, you just want some random stuff, and you want it to interpret what you're saying, then that's fine, have a looser prompt. But the more specific you are, the better able these platforms are to give you what you're asking for, what you're looking for. So from a prompt engineering standpoint, we could talk for the rest of the night about that discipline. There are actually jobs out there called prompt engineering. You can get paid to do this for organizations and companies. But that's something to keep in mind. Yes?
You said you was a terrible. Have you tested them against each other in terms of giving each of them the same question or objection and seeing if they give you the same answer?
So the question was, have I tested these against each other to see if they give you the same answer? I'm going to answer that in two ways. First of all, you will never get the exact same answer if you ask the same question to any one of these tools. It's not a right or wrong, it's not a binary answer, right? And the reason for that is what I said at the beginning around how it generates the answers. The answers are based on a statistical model, and those statistics change based on whatever's going on at the moment. So you'll get an answer that's similar, right? But it might not be exact. But to your specific question about how these platforms compare to each other, I have not, but the internet has. And so if you go to Google and you say, how does Midjourney compare to Leonardo.ai, you will get a comparison. What I will tell you though is that if you're just starting on this journey, don't worry about that. Pick a tool that looks interesting to you and just play with it, right? Unless you're going to be doing some of this stuff professionally, at this point you're just playing with it. Now, what I will say, where most of the analysis that I've seen is around what's called the large language models. Those are the things that are largely text-based, and that's the stuff that's in the top left-hand corner. Those platforms do generally have things that they are better at than others. So for instance, ChatGPT historically has been a better analysis engine. So it's better able to interpret things that you're asking for and to give you some quote-unquote reasoning. Claude is a better writer, right? So you're going to get better writing if you ask it to write something. And I'm not as familiar with the other ones just yet, but Gemini is coming along. Meta's AI is making leaps and bounds. And again, these things change, very frequently. But I would say to start with, don't worry about how they compare, just find one and play with it. All right. So I want to leave you with one other thing. I said earlier that photography didn't exist in 1800. The first picture was taken in 1827. In the late 1850s, there was a poet named Charles Baudelaire who said this about photography. He said, if photography is allowed to supplement art in some of its functions, it will soon have supplanted or corrupted it altogether, thanks to the stupidity of the multitude, which is its natural ally. He didn't think very much of photography or the masses. Photography democratized the ability to capture and preserve images. Prior to photography, you had to be able to afford a painter to paint a portrait of your family in order to preserve that for history. So AI was a democratizing force. Today, there are approximately 2 trillion photos generated every year. And the industry is about $11 billion a year, just for the photography industry. We established at the beginning that you all have cell phones in your pocket. And what that means is that you essentially have a full-on digital darkroom and a publishing studio in your pocket. You could argue that all of that is an offshoot of that first photograph taken in 1827. Those are static images. Point in time, 2D static images. If photography can do that, can you imagine what AI is going to do?
If you would like to connect, please reach out on LinkedIn.